Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 7 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. From your analysis section, which also provide you the much important avenue to practice daily answer writing, in the first topic, we'll try to assess the status of healthcare for women in our country by using the recent data which has been provided to us by the National Health Authority. Then, in the second topic, we'll try to learn about the different methodologies for poverty estimation in our country and the recent steps by the Government of India in this direction. Then in your simplified section, we'll take up 5 news. We will not only try to provide the simplification of the news for you, but also provide you the much important value addition, keeping in mind the approaching prelims 2026. So, stay tuned. Where the article highlights the improvement which has been made for women healthcare in our country under the provisions of Ayushman Bharat Yojana, which is a government's central flagship scheme, even though the challenges persist and forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the larger theme of government policies and interventions. So, as the irony of the country is that the healthcare for women, the women which are the backbone of not only our families, communities, but also of the economy of the country as they form an integral component of the demographic dividend, the health care for them have remained overlooked, underfunded, as well as inadequately researched. However, the today's article tells us a different picture. It says that women accounts for 49% of the total hospital admissions under the government's flagship health insurance scheme, and that is Ayushman Bharat Yojana, according to the annual report for 2024-25 of the National Health Authority, which actually signals the improved access to institutional healthcare for women, and that's what the report says. However, there are different government report itself which also shows a different pictures to us. For example, as per the National Family Health Survey 5 from 21 to 23, almost 57% of the women in the country aged between 15 to 49 years are anemic. Anemia is basically a disease which pertains to iron deficiency in red blood cell. Keep this in mind that such iron-rich proteins are actually primarily responsible for the carrying of oxygen from your lungs to the various tissues. So we can also say that almost 57% of the women in the country aged between 15 to 49 years are actually having less oxygen in their lungs. And such inadequate health infrastructure which prevails in our country is also reflected from the abysmal maternal mortality ratio which we have in our country, and that is 93 per 1 lakh women, which basically implies that 93 per 1 lakh women actually dies or succumbs to death while they are pregnant or while giving the birth or within 40 days of the termination of pregnancy. Keep this in mind that for several states, such as for example Madhya Pradesh, the state with the highest maternal mortality ratio, the MMR actually exceeds up to 175 per 1 lakh women. And as per the World Health Organization report of 2024 itself, there takes place 1 maternal death across the world every 2 minutes, and that took place in the year of 2023. So to further understand the status of healthcare for the women in our country, we'll take up a case study of the complete healthcare status for the women specifically in the tribal region. And for that, we are actually using a tribal health report of 2023, according to which 65% of the tribal women actually suffers from anemia. 25% pregnant and lactating mothers, only 25, have sufficient calorie and protein intake. So almost 75% actually faces kind of deficiency of these calorie and protein intake. When we talk about the rate of institutional delivery for these tribal women who are pregnant, that stand as low as 70%. And even though there is no such official data which has been provided to us, there are various reports which has been published in the Hindu, according to which it estimates that the maternal mortality rate for tribal women in our country actually exceeds 100 per 1 lakh live birth. And when these women are actually giving the children, the birth to the children, the under 5 mortality rate, or the children who dies within the lifespan of 5 years, that is 57 per 1000 live birth. And that reflects the poor status of health infrastructure, specifically in the rural and the tribal region. To understand that, we'll take up actually a research which was conducted by the National Health Authority itself and published in the public domain in the year of 2022. According to which 80% of the rural village hamlet in the state of Madhya Pradesh were at least 5 kilometers away from the nearest primary healthcare center. Forget about the secondary and tertiary healthcare. And this inaccessibility and inadequate maternal and children care was also highlighted in the B. Chakravarti committee, which was created in the year of 2018 and surfaced as recently as a very prominent case which actually featured in the newspaper in the month of October and November in 2024, where there was a tribal woman hailing from the district of the freedom fighter Alluri Sita Ramaraju. And this tribal woman was pregnant with the demographic dividend of the country, and she called for an ambulance, and then she had to wait indefinitely for that ambulance to arrive, and that ambulance ultimately never arrived. The reason for that was the poor road connectivity in that particular tribal region in the district of a freedom fighter, and thus ultimately she was forced to give birth on the road itself. Then these issues are further augmented by the prevailing medical illiteracy in the rural areas. So keep this in mind, that when we are saying medical illiteracy, it also basically exemplifies the prevailing patriarchal norms which prevails there, and the subordinate position of the woman. Because of which, many of the time, these women are actually forced to conceive a child at a very early age, when their body is not completely grown enough, developed enough to actually carry a child. Then it is further augmented by the nutritional deficiency which prevails in the tribal region. Why? Because of the high level of poverty. And ultimately, because of no choice, they actually opt for non-institutional delivery, and all of that translates to this high level of anemia and high maternal mortality ratio which you guys are seeing here. Now note down two important data. As per census 2011, almost 49% of the tribal women were actually considered as literate. Keep this in mind, that as per the official kind of the definition which has been provided to us by the government, if a person is able to read and comprehend and write a text of class 10th level, even then the person is actually considered as a literate person. So 49% of the tribal women were literate. And as per the socio-economic caste census of 2011, 40% of the scheduled tribe population was actually living below the poverty line. Now use these two data and create a scenario in your mind. Imagine a tribal woman which has low level of nutrition support to particular being provided to her by the family. Then there is a poor status of health infrastructure, and she is also facing low level of literacy. How she is able to actually expected to gain such level of education, to gain such level of skill to be ready for industry 4.0. Thus this low level of skill accumulation actually translates to what? Industry required skill offered mismatch which takes place. And when these women are not getting the job, they are not financially independent, and thus they do not hold any kind of decision making power in such rural and tribal areas where there exist the patriarchal norms leading to their subordinate position, ultimately creating a vicious cycle of poverty. So for example, if there is a particular generation which is poor, obviously they will not be able to give social capital to their next generation. Like for example, good level of healthcare, good nutritious diet, good level of education. And thus the next generation will also remain poor, and thus will face the same problem, creating a vicious cycle of poverty altogether. So what has been the government's response to it? What are the causes behind such poor status of healthcare for the women in our country? So you guys can recall when we were discussing about the Sustainable Development Goal 3. which basically direct the state to improve the status of healthcare in our country, as it has been directed by the Article 47 of the Constitution itself, acting as a directive principle to the state. Also, the Sustainable Development Goal 3 sets up some kind of targets for the government to achieve. Like for example, to reduce down the maternal mortality rate to 70, to reduce down the out-of-pocket expenditure only up to 7% of the total health cost, to actually achieve 100% immunization and universal health coverage by the year of 2030. Thus, under the National Health Policy 2017, the government had envisaged raising the health expenditure to 2.5% of GDP by the year of 2025. However, if we refer to the budget estimate, it only stood up at 1.9% of the GDP, which we are actually directing towards the healthcare sector. The idea is that keep this in mind, that when we are saying that we have not been able to achieve the National Health Policy 2017 and we are only directing 1.9% of our GDP towards healthcare, keep this in mind that to actually the population which we are catering to, that keeps on increasing every single year. Don't you think that thus, for a large section of the people, if the government is not spending that much on the primary, secondary and tertiary level of healthcare, thus they are kind of forced, these women are forced to look towards the private sector. And this is where there lies the issue of unaffordability of the healthcare. Just look at the out-of-pocket expenditure as a share of household consumption expenditure in the rural areas, how that has significantly increased from the year of 2000 to 23, almost being 7%, almost being 6% in the urban areas of the total consumption expenditure. And thus, as per the Public Health Foundation of India, 55 million Indians were actually pushed into the poverty between the year of 2014 to 2020 due to the catastrophic healthcare cost. In this case, recall the female labor force participation rate which we have as per the Periodic Labor Force Survey 22-23, that stands at 41%. The other side of the coin is that it basically implies that 59% of the women are not financially independent in our country. How they will be able to actually afford this ever increasing high out-of-pocket expenditure for healthcare cost, that too such expensive healthcare cost in the private sector, when it is not being augmented by the government. Let's say somehow there was a tribal woman, she somehow arranged some portion of her money and she went to access the healthcare, then there lies the problem of the poor healthcare infrastructure. Just look at the shortages which we have. The government health centers face the shortfalls, and just look at the data which has been provided to us by the Rural Health Statistic of 2021. In the primary healthcare centers, in the rural community healthcare center, or even in the urban community healthcare center, so there exists lack of government medical facilities. Then there exists skewed doctor to patient ratio. Overall, 67% of the sanctioned posts of specialists in these community healthcare centers are actually lying vacant, according to the Rural Health Statistic of 21-22 itself. The World Health Organization basically recommends that there shall be one doctor per 1000 population. However, as per the Niti Aayog data, in our country there exists one doctor per 1834 people. And these people keeps on increasing while the doctors are not increasing with the equal rate. All of these issues lead to ultimately what? What is the impact of this unaffordability and lack of infrastructure in our country that can be showcased with the overcrowded government hospitals and overworked staff? So just do a social experiment as a future bureaucrat. Just go to a nearby secondary or tertiary healthcare center. Just ask them that you need a MRI scan to actually assess whether you are suffering from a serious disease and thus you require an immediate treatment. Even in any tier 2 or tier 3 cities, they will actually give you a date of weeks ahead to actually even assess whether you are suffering from a serious disease or not. Then there exists an issue of lack of supply and essential drugs and equipments. In this case, just recall the import dependency which we have for active pharmaceutical ingredients with China. Any supply chain disruption will ultimately translate into the increasing cost of generic medicine or the delay in the treatments. Thus, if the healthcare has become so much unaffordable, if the price of generic medicine is increasing rapidly, then it is obvious that in the rural areas there is growing reliance on unqualified practitioner or quacks practicing various kind of social taboos. Even the over the counter medicine has become more popular, and that is one of the reason why in our country we actually rely more on over the counter medicine rather to go to the doctor, because we cannot afford the out of pocket expenditure for healthcare. And that ultimately leads to what? The vicious cycle of medical poverty. So let's say if a certain percentage of our population is actually suffering from some serious disease, don't you think that the labor productivity for that percentage of population is going to significantly decline? Thus, the overall gross domestic production of our country will decline as well. And if the GDP is declining, less number of jobs, because less kind of impetus for the industries to actually produce something. And that will ultimately lead to what? More unemployment. And that is basically the vicious cycle of medical poverty now. Ultimately, there also exists problem with the fraudulent practices which has been adopted by the private sector, specifically in the absence of alternative. So in this case, we'll also try to look at 2 or 3 major issues of the Ayushman Bharat Yojana itself. For example, under Ayushman Bharat Yojana, various reports have surfaced which has talked about the treating of dead patients by these private hospitals. Why? Because they want to extract money from the government. Or for example, there was a curious case of 999 times 10 times 9, a mobile number, which was highlighted in the CAG report. This particular number was actually used to register more than 1 lakh users under Ayushman Bharat Yojana on using the fake Aadhaar cards. Then let's say for example there is a tribal woman. She went to a private hospital nearby her where some kind of tertiary special healthcare unit was actually available, and she wants to get treated there. So the initial estimation of the cost is that it falls within the range of 5 lakh rupees, and thus it is very well covered under the Ayushman Bharat Yojana. But what if the post hospitalization bill is, let's say, 7 lakh rupees? How she is actually supposed to kind of sum up this additional cost of 2 lakh rupees? And that will further lead to augment the issue of rural indebtedness. Then as per the World Health Organization itself, in our country the disease itself are rising. We are going to face dual disease burden. We were already facing the classical communicable disease like TB, malaria, pandemic. For example, our country is actually considered as the world's TB capital with more than 2.5 million cases annually. Now the non-communicable diseases are also increasing, leading to the dual disease burden. Non-communicable disease like diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular diseases. So as per the Indian Council of Medical Research report, these non-communicable diseases are going to be accounted for 65% of the deaths in our country and will lead to a cumulative loss of $6.2 trillion to our economy by 2030 as per the Lancet report of 2024. So, what our government has done so far to improve the status of healthcare specifically for the women? The first and foremost is the government has launched 2 important centrally sponsored schemes. One is Janani Suraksha Yojana, the other is Matra Vandana Yojana. So let's say for example there is a woman who has given birth, like for example that tribal woman who was forced to give birth to a child on the road. Is she covered under Janani Suraksha Yojana? The answer is yes. The Yojana which was launched under National Health Mission, where it covers your public healthcare centers as well as private healthcare centers. Under these healthcare centers, such woman who has given birth, she will be provided with 14,000 rupees in the urban areas and 1,000 rupees in the rural areas. But there are 2 classification categories. First is, if that woman is falling below the poverty household, then she is covered even in the high performing state, low performing state, everywhere. But in the specifically high performing state, the such money under the monetary provisions under the Janani Suraksha Yojana is only given to SC and ST women, and if the woman is above the age of 19 years, and only up for 2 live births. So it basically also has an integral component of national family planning as well. Second is Matra Vandana Yojana, which aims to provide maternity benefit to pregnant and lactating women, where 5,000 rupees is given by the government in 3 equal installments. First is when you register for it. Second, 2000 rupees is given after 6 months, an antenatal checkup. And then ultimately, when the complete immunization of child has been achieved, then 2000 rupees has been provided by the government. Then the government has also launched Janani Shishu Suraksha Karyakram to actually eliminate the out-of-pocket expenditure for pregnant women altogether, where the government is trying to promote free delivery, including various kind of surgeries and free medicines as well. And that is exactly the idea which the government has taken under Surakshit Matritva Ashvasan or Suman Yojana, where the government is saying that, let's say for example, if there is a pregnant woman and she goes to any primary healthcare center and you are the doctor of this primary healthcare center, then you are required to provide her free medical checkup, or let's say provide her any kind of immunization which she needs. And if all of this has not been availed by this primary healthcare center, then it will be charged with heavy penalty. Then under Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan, every 9th day of a month, such primary healthcare centers in the rural area will actually conduct a prenatal or antenatal checkups for such women. Then, to further promote the institutional delivery, the government is also trying to improve the kind of the infrastructure of the labor rooms in various government hospitals, and for that purpose the government has launched Laksh initiative. Then the government is very specifically tracking the maternal mortality ratio under your MDSR portal, as well as the reproductive and the children's health care portal. Then to actually eradicate the issue of anemia and make our country anemia free by the year of 2047, a Anemia Mukt Bharat Abhiyan has been launched as well. So you guys can recall that we were talking about the inadequate accessibility to the healthcare, a issue which was highlighted by Bijoy Chakravarti committee in 2018. We are going to use this committee to provide some innovative way forwards. The first and foremost is we need to expand the efficiency of insurance like Pradhan Mantri Ayushman Bharat Yojana, as well as to provide digital healthcare, telemedicine with the use of artificial intelligence. And we need to do that and penetrate that to tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So for example, if I'm sitting in my village and I can make a call to, let's say for example, a government doctor, or have a video call with him, get some, let's say for example, digital consultancy, and with that I can actually buy a good prescribed medicine by the government from a nearby journey, let's say for example, the kind of the medical shops which the government has, then that can actually help me to reduce the issue of over-the-counter medicine. Then we actually need to increase the infrastructure, specifically in the primary and the secondary healthcare center. And if we are going to focus more on preventive healthcare by increasing the infrastructure, the availability of the doctors, expert doctors in this primary and secondary healthcare, then don't you think it will actually reduce the curative care load at the tertiary level? For this purpose, the case study of Thailand can be quoted, which actually invested heavily in the public healthcare, and thus it actually led to the kind of the increasing productivity from the demographic dividend, and that has led to the sharp increase in their economy as well. And thus we need to sensitize the next generation about the health benefits, and that can be added in their curriculum as well under the National Education Policy of 2020, for which we can actually follow the same model which was adopted by Finland, the Finland's health education model. Now, because the prelims is approaching, we have also kept a prelims corner for the specific scheme of Pradhan Mantri Ayushman Bharat Yojana, under which 5 lakh rupees per family per year is provided, and it covers specifically your secondary and tertiary healthcare. Keep this in mind, it is a centrally sponsored scheme, and where you can actually avail the kind of the benefits which are being offered, this 5 lakh rupees secondary and tertiary healthcare in both public as well as private hospital. The identification of beneficiaries is done on the basis of socio-economic caste census of 2011. So there is no restriction on the family size and gender. And under the recent amendments, your Asha workers, Anganwadi workers, as well as every citizen who is aged above the age of 70 years. So let's say for example, if let's say there is Mukesh Ambani and he is more than 70 years old, and even though he does not fall under the kind of the bottom income quintile in this socio-economic caste census, even then he can avail the facility of Ayushman Bharat Yojana. And he can avail it not only in the state of Maharashtra but any state, because there is interstate operability. The nodal agency to implement this scheme is your National Health Authority, and to check any issues of fraud as it was taking place. For example, in the case of the fake registration under Aadhaar cards, the National Anti-Fraud Unit has been created. The expenses which are covered are your medical examination and consultation, your pre and post hospitalization, if you are admitted in the intensive care unit, as well as if you are required a medical implantation. So remember all of these provisions, attempt this question, and we move forward to the next news, where the article throws light on the data gap. The data gap which persists in the terms of poverty estimation in the country and the reforms which are required. The issue which forms an important component of your GS1 paper under the larger theme of issues of poverty and poverty elimination. So, you guys can actually recall the furor which was caused by a report released by World Bank titled Poverty and Equity Brief in India, according to which people who were living under the bracket of extreme poverty. So what is extreme poverty according to the World Bank? A person who is living or earning less than $2.15 per day. So according to this particular report, such people of living within the bracket of extreme poverty in our country, the percentage of such people was 18% of the population in the year of 2011, and that has drastically declined to a meager 2.3% in the year of 2024. However, keep this in mind that in our country, the poverty estimation is not done on the basis of income level as it has been adopted by the developed nations. Rather, we actually calculate the poverty estimation in our country on the basis of consumption expenditure, which can also be reflected from the methodologies which were adopted by the various committees appointed by the government. So keep this in mind that when we look at this consumption expenditure, there were basically two segmentation. One was pre-1991 level and the second was post-1991 level. In pre-1991 level, you guys can recall that how we were dealing with as a country with the issue of food security and extreme poverty. So at that point of time, we actually focused more upon the consumption expenditure which was actually done on food items, which is actually reflected from the kind of the estimation which was done by the Alag Committee of 1979, which basically said that let's say there is a certain level of consumption expenditure which is required to attain a certain level of nutritional requirement, and this nutritional requirement is actually necessary for the overall development of an individual. And it found that at that point of time, 1/3 or 33% of the population was actually doing consumption expenditure less than this nutritional requirement. Then there was your Lakdawala Committee 1993. It said that we shall not solely focus upon the consumption expenditure on food items on random basis. Rather, we should take up the aspect of calorie consumption. So Lakdawala Committee said that let's say for this overall development of an individual, 2400 calories per day is required. To achieve which, it basically selected certain items of staple food and then calculated the prices of this staple food on the basis of consumer price index combined industrial worker and agricultural laborer, and found out that 36% of the population in the year of 1993 were actually spending less than a certain amount which was required to attain this 2400 calorie a day for the overall development. Then a government appointed another committee in 2009 which published its report in 2011, and that was your Tendulkar Committee 2011. Tendulkar Committee said that post LPG reforms of 1991, the consumption pattern of the economy has significantly changed, because now the people are not only spending a lot of their share of income only on the food items, rather they have actually diversified. And let's say for example, they are also spending to generate social capital, like for example for healthcare, to actually attain a good amount of educational level, skill set, spending on vehicles, let's say, buying houses, going to watch movies, etc. And thus it said that now there will be a consumption expenditure on the basket of goods, on the basis of which it basically estimated a certain level of poverty line. It said that let's say for example there is a person who is earning 33 rupees a day or 990 rupees a month in urban areas and 27 rupees a day or 810 rupees in rural areas. Any person who is earning less than that will be considered as a person falling below poverty line. And even at that point of time in the year of 2011, there were 21% or 1/5 of the population which was falling below the poverty line. Then there was another committee, that was Rangarajan. Rangarajan said that yes, indeed, the consumption expenditure by the larger economy actually shows very diverse trend. But at the same point of time, we should not completely discard the calorie consumption criteria which was taken by the Lakdawala committee. Because if we are talking about the overall development, we should focus on the healthy development of an individual. So it said, it also basically kind of included the grassroots level survey which was conducted by the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. And it said that for such overall efficient development of a person in the rural area, the calorie requirement is 2155 and in urban areas it is 2090 calorie. Now it again calculated the amount of food items which will be required to achieve this calorie level and what was the prices of that level, and thus calculated that along with this food and non-food item, if there is a person who is earning less than 47 rupees a day in urban areas and 32 rupees in rural areas, that person will be considered as falling below poverty line. And as per Rangarajan committee, 29% of the population was still falling below this. And this has actually been ascertained by the recently CRISIL report which was published in Indian Express, where the economists, they basically said that let's say the cost of a thali is 30 rupees and let's say a person requires 2 such thalis a day. Then even then 50% of our current population cannot afford such 2 thalis a day. However, there is a new report which has been published by the Department of Economic and Policy Research, where they have actually updated the poverty line for 20 major states, but for this they have used household consumption expenditure survey, according to which the biggest decline in poverty between 2011 to 23 in rural poverty was actually witnessed by Odisha, from 47% to 8%. So now only 8% people living in the rural areas of Odisha are poor. Similarly, decline in the urban poverty, such biggest decline has actually registered by Bihar. So now only 9.1% people living in the urban areas of Bihar are actually poor. As per the today's article, the rural poverty is currently lowest in Himachal Pradesh, only 0.4% of the people of Himachal Pradesh in overall rural areas. And it is highest in the Chhattisgarh, obviously because it also consists of a large tribal belt as well. So this estimation of poverty by the Department of Economic and Policy Research, which falls within and works under the Reserve Bank of India, keep this in mind that they did not use the Consumer Price Index combined inflation for the adjustment of poverty. Why? Because they said that weight of food even in the rural Rangarajan poverty line basket and in the rural CPI. In Rangarajan poverty line basket, it was 57%. So 57% of the total items were what? Food items. If we calculate the rural CPI, Consumer Price Index combined, 54% of the items are what? Food items. But they said that it does not reflect with the household consumption expenditure survey of 23-24. Why? Because if we look at the monthly per capita expenditure, the food items share is only 47% in rural areas and only 39% in urban areas. So it does not directly co-linked with the share of food which we are keeping in the CPI and as well as in the Rangarajan basket. They said what we are going to do, we are going to create a new price index where we'll keep the constituent item exactly same how it was done by Rangarajan committee. So let's say for example, we'll keep certain food, non-food item, the expenditure on education, health, the rent which person is required to give, vehicle, fuel, etc. Then we will see that for this particular constituent items, what is the inflation level which is prevailing in the economy at that point of time. And then we will see that for such food item, what is the share of expenditure by the different household. And then by such calculation, they have actually reached to this particular data that poverty has declined with such drastic rates in several states like Odisha and Bihar. There's 2 states which have actually registered the drastic decline. But keep this in mind that the very same report which has been published by the Department of Economic and Policy Research under RBI, the same report suggests that there shall be impetus on the multi-dimensional poverty calculation, which is actually done by the UNDP, United Nations Development Programme, which releases Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index 2023, where the poverty is actually based upon three categories, the three dimensions of poverty. First is under the health sector. What is the contribution a person is making in nutrition, in achieving child mortality? In education sector, the years of schoolings are counted, school attendance. Then in the living standard, several things actually which showcases the living standard of a person, the kind of cooking fuel which you are using, sanitation, drinking water, the kind of the regular supply of electricity, the housing which you have, the assets which you have created. And thus by calculating on these various parameters of health, education and living standard, as per the MDPI, in 2023, 18% of our country's population or 230 million people were multidimensionally poor in our country. But yes, it did decline very sharply. In 2005-6, 55% of our population are multidimensionally poor, but that has significantly reduced to 18% of the population in 2023. What are the causes? So yes, you guys can recall from the last lecture as well, the various causes of unemployment which we had discussed. And obviously those causes will act as the causes for poverty also. In this particular section, we'll have a kind of a different look right now. We'll also try to inculcate some new debates. Like for example, if you guys can recall in the last lecture, we were talking about the concept of jobless growth which is taking place. To actually show this thing in your answers, you guys can directly write that how in the budget 2025 our nominal GDP is growing by 10%. But in comparison to that, you guys can actually quote the first monthly labor force data which was actually published in the month of May, according to which there was 5% unemployment which was prevailing across our country. So our country is growing 10% nominal GDP, and at the same time there exists 5% of unemployment, and that shows that we are having a jobless growth. Various reasons were cited as well. For example, the tariff imposition, trade protectionism, closing of international markets for Indian products. That is a major problem. If we do not have market, the companies do not have incentives to produce. So it's very obvious that the manufacturing output is going to significantly decline, and that can lead to various job layoffs. And thus job layoffs will ultimately lead to what? Unemployment. So yes, there is a jobless growth which we are facing. The major reason for this is also, as per the article says that, let's say for example, there is a jobless growth which we are facing right now. The major reason for that is that if we see in the year of 2001 to 2011, our real GDP growth was 7%. However, in the GDP growth between 2011 to 23, keep this in mind, it also includes what? The pandemic period which took place. The real GDP growth rate has only been 5.7%. Thus, it shows the decline in the poverty, the slower decline in the poverty in comparison to the last decade which took place. Why? Because of the K-shaped recovery which has been registered by various industries, various labor incentive industries, specifically for example in the case of textile industry. We have only registered 6% growth in the last few years. Ultimately, there is also taking place the mechanization of labor force as we are moving towards Industry 4.0 with machine learning, big data analytics, artificial intelligence, etc. So if the same amount of work can be done at a minimal cost and in a much lesser time by the machines, then obviously the companies which follows the profit maximization theory, why they are actually going to hire more labor. And that is also reflected that only 68 million workers were actually added in the agriculture sector since 2017. And that is actually more than the people who have been added in the non-agriculture sector. And also keep this in mind that as per the Economic Survey 2025 data, we need to keep on adding 78 million non-farm jobs every year 2030 till 2030 to actually kind of sustain the demographic dividend which we are having right now. The problem is that even with the automation which is taking place, the companies can still hire you, create employment, but you are offering them low skill set, leading to frictional unemployment. So for example, as per the Periodic Labor Force Survey 2023, 86% of the graduates, the 86% of the graduates which passed from those universities, they did not had any vocational training altogether. Or for example, as for your India skill report of 2024, 50% of the total graduates, only 54% were actually having the skill set to be employed in this industry 4.0. I don't have job, I am unemployed, I basically do not have enough money and resources to provide social capital to the next generation, to provide them adequate healthcare, nutritious diet, good level of education. And if I cannot provide them that, don't you think they will not be ready for the industry 5.0, and thus it will lead to the vicious cycle of poverty, which is also reflected in our abysmal ranking in the various global parameters. Like for example, in the global health index, we have ranked 105th, and in the human development index, we have actually ranked 134th. The task for the day is, can you guys tell in the comment box which are the organization which actually releases these indices? So what are the steps which has been taken by the government of India to actually tackle this issue of poverty? The first and foremost, always remember to create this table in your answer, that in the budget 2024, the government came with employment linked incentive scheme, under which it has three provisions. First is, it is going to provide 15,000 rupees in 2 installments to all the employees who are entering in the formal sector only. Keep this in mind. And if you have a salary eligibility of below 1 lakh rupees per month, it's not like you are earning, let's say for example, more than 5 lakh rupees a month and then also taking 15,000 rupees from the government. Thodi si sharam hai. Then the companies are required to provide these people compulsory online financial literacy courses. Under the scheme B, there will be wage subsidy will be provided to the first timers. Additional employment shall be created in the manufacturing sector. And the government is targeting to provide 8 to 24% incentives to both employer as well as employee. For example, even to the employees, the government is saying we are going to provide you 3,000 rupees per month reimbursement to the employer for providing the jobs, for if you are able to retain this particular worker for the next 6 months. And the government is thus envisaging that it will lead to additional employment in all the sector and as well as fulfill the economic survey 2024 target which we have set for ourselves. Further, to actually create self-employment, the government is providing collateral free loans to the people. Create jobs, create shops, create innovative, let's say for example, designs for the future under PM Mudra Yojana. Under your Swanidhi scheme, so again we'll take up a kind of a detour because we need to focus on the prelims corner as well. So you need to learn about the important schemes of the government as well. So what are the provisions of this PM Swanidhi scheme? It's a central sector scheme by which Ministry, Housing and Urban Affairs provides what? Affordable working capital loans without collateral to urban street vendor in 3 tranches, 10,000, 20,000 and 50,000. If let's say for example you took the first loan and did a timely payment, the government will actually provide the interest subsidy of 7% per annum, and then you can avail the second tranche loan as well. The lending institutions under these particular schemes are your non-banking financial companies, microfinance institutions, self-help groups like Kudumshri model. The eligible states are the states which have notified the rules under Street Vendor Act of 2014. And all the street vendors who are engaged in urban areas, they are actually eligible for the provision of Swanidhi scheme. Then to further promote the idea of local for vocal, the government is promoting Make in India and Stand Up India. For the formalization of labor workforce to provide them social security net, the government has come up with e-Shram portal. For their skilling, there is Kaushal Vikas Yojana. For the skilling of the traditional artisans, there is Vishwakarma Yojana. Whenever you guys are writing way forward, remember to integrate the larger objectives of the government, like how when we are making for our country the standard of the product, let's say for example under one district one product, it shall be so high to match the quality standards which are required by the other countries, so that we can ultimately also make these products for the world as well. And when we are saying that the 30% of our economy actually is coming from the MSME sector, then we need to strengthen them as well. And the further impetus shall be done for agriculture and rural based industries, for which in the budget 2024, the government actually launched Agriculture Accelerator Fund to providing loans to those people who are doing innovations in the agriculture sector at the grassroots level. Keep this way forward in your mind, this particular scheme for the prelims, and write this particular question, and we move forward to the next news, where we'll try to read about the issue of air pollution, rising air pollution in the National Capital Territory. What is the context of the news? The article today highlights that how there is persisting high pollution level which is surging in our national capital right before the Diwali. Obviously, we have a tradition of burning firecrackers in our country. My question to all of you is, can anybody of you suggest a very innovative madhyam mark to this issue of burning firecrackers which leads to this air pollution? Not complete ban, or let's say for example a kind of a madhyam mark which we can take. Why this issue is of so much of importance? Because as per the World Health Organization report of 2024, our country is the third most polluted country in the world, with Delhi being the most polluted capital city. And the people of Delhi, 96% of them are actually exposed to high level of particulate matter 2.5, which is actually responsible for various kind of cardiovascular diseases. That is also highlighted as per the Lancet report of 2023, according to which air pollution itself amounted to 11% of death which took place in Delhi. In this context, now look at this particular thing. As per the World Health Organization 24-hour permissible limit, for PM10, it is around 45 microgram per meter cube, and for PM2.5, it is 15 microgram per meter cube. The national 24-hour permissible limit, which we have kept for ourselves, for PM10 is 100 microgram per meter cube, and PM2.5 is 60 microgram per meter cube. Even against this World Health Organization's 24-hour guideline for PM10, which is between 45 to 50 microgram per meter cube, Delhi's hourly reading was already 16 times higher, thus acting as a major challenge for the authorities. The question which shall arise in your mind is that what are the causes for such high level of pollution in our country? The first and foremost is the geography of the national capital. For example, this is where the Delhi lies, adjacent with the borders of Punjab, Haryana and Rajasthan. So when in this green belt region, when the farmers, when they have harvested their crop, the remnants of the crop is mostly burned by the farmers. When they burn this particular crop, the residue of it, this stubble burning, the residue actually moves towards Delhi. Why? Because when in the month of October and November, there is withdrawal of monsoon which is taking place, and thus the northwesterly winds actually comes in this region to fill the gap from high pressure to low pressure, and thus they bring all of that particulate matter from these green belt states to Delhi. Also, there is dust from Gulf which arrives, the various pollutants like PM2.5, SO2 that arrives. Also in Delhi itself, there is taking place emission from various vehicle and industry. Keep this in mind that in Delhi, this vehicular emission, which is actually contributes to almost 40% of the total amount of PM2.5 and PM10 which actually exist. So it's not like stubble burning by these farmers is only the major reason. Second, when such, let's say for example, pollutants has arrived in the region of Delhi and has been concentrated in this region, they might have been able to disperse in the other region. But it is the topography of Delhi which again act as a barrier, because it is surrounded, kind of a landlocked from different region. From north, there are Himalayas. In west, there are Thar Desert and Aravallis. In south, there is Central Plateau. Even there is absence of any sea breeze to actually disperse these pollutants. You guys can argue that, sir, we have read about the concept of when, let's say for example, the air is actually gets warmed up, it starts rising, and when this air is rising, the pollutants also rises with air, and thus they will not impact the people who are living at the ground level in the troposphere. The argument is correct till here. But what if there takes place temperature inversion? So normally what we expect in the troposphere is that with the increasing altitude, the temperature actually declines. So for example, for every 1 kilometer rise of altitude, there is decline of 6.5 degrees Celsius of temperature, and this is something which we called as normal lapse rate. But in winter what happens? So let's say for example, in the months of winter in Delhi, there is obviously existing low temperature at the ground level. So let's say there is sun, the solar radiation actually comes and falls at the ground level. So the air starts getting warmed up and starts rising. As the air rises up, the high pressure cold air actually takes place at the ground level. As the ground is losing heat, the warm air is rising. As it rises, it actually comes at one particular place in the month of October and November where there is absence of any cloud cover. There is complete clearance of winter night. And thus this particular air is able to rise further and further. And thus now this hot air which is here, let's say for example the temperature here is 20 degrees Celsius. In comparison to that, here the temperature is 25 degrees Celsius. So now there is dispersion of air which is taking place in this direction from high pressure to other low pressure. And thus the temperature inversion has taken place. The particulate matters from vehicles, factories, constructions, stubble burning is not able to go beyond this layer of temperature inversion. Further pollutants are being added. Why? Because of the expansion of grey infrastructure, absence of green and blue spaces because of deforestation, land use changes which has taken place. Why? Because of the rapid urbanization which has taken place, making Delhi the world's most polluted capital city and India with the third worst air quality out of 134 countries. So, the government, following certain precedent, actually created the Commission for Air Quality Management. What were the precedent? The Stockholm Declaration of 1972, which provided for right to clean environment. The Constitutional Directive Principle of State Policy under Article 48A, added by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976, which directed the state to protect environment. Keep this in mind that as a citizen, it is also our fundamental duty under Article 51A Clause G, the duty of citizen to protect environment. Then there is a Supreme Court directive under MC Mehta versus Union of India, where it has introduced the polluters pay principle, that the industries which are polluting the environment is actually liable to pay for it as well. So taking all of these precedents into consideration, the government has done two things. First and foremost, it has created a very specific body to control the air pollution, and that is Commission for Air Quality Management, which is a statutory body under the Commission for Air Quality Management 2021 for the prevention of air pollution in Delhi as well as National Capital Territory region and adjoining areas. Keep this in mind that it is directly accountable to the Parliament and the chairperson is the secretary which is appointed by the Government of India. Then there is a particular Central Pollution Control Board. Can anybody tell in the comment box that this Central Pollution Control Board has been created by the Air Act or the Water Act? Now in our country, the pollution is actually measured as per the National Air Quality Index, which is actually developed by CPCB, where we actually kind of calculate the level of various pollutants in the air, such as particulate matter 2.5 and 10, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur, carbon monoxide, ammonia, lead and ozone. Keep this in mind that when we are calculating the level of pollution in the air, we do not calculate the level of carbon dioxide. So the government has taken various steps, like first and foremost, we have kind of promoted the electronic vehicles. The Delhi has also opted for odd and even policy of vehicle. Very recently, the government actually shifted to BS6 which actually emits 4 to 5 times less SO2 than BS4 vehicles. We are promoting these electronic vehicles under your FAME scheme, faster adoption of electric vehicles, as well as sustainable alternative towards affordable transportation Satat scheme. Then the government has banned the use of pet coke and furnace oil. Technical interventions to actually control the issue of stubble burning in this green belt region has taken place by introduction of happy cedar. Very recently, the government has also basically launched green crackers. The name of such green crackers you should remember for prelims: Swas, Star, Safal. Then there is a specific National Clean Air Program which actually targets 40% of reduction in PM levels by 25-26 under the National Clean Air Program from the 2017 level, which will cover 102 cities. And 131 cities will actually be ranked on the basis of the action which they have taken to reduce the air pollution. And for which purpose they will actually launch a city-specific air pollution abatement action plan, for which there is also international support and funding by World Bank, Swiss Development Corporation, etc. If you will ever writing answer on air pollution, you guys can actually provide for innovative way forward. Like for example, something which has been created by Clean Air Asia, create a diagram altogether. We can invest in energy efficient power generation, improve the domestic industry and municipal waste management, make greener and more compact city, reduce agricultural waste incineration, provide universal access to clean and affordable fuel. Ultimately, keep this in mind that government is going to conduct study on smog eating technology which can actually combat air pollution, the technology which can reduce nitrogen dioxide and harmful hydrocarbon in public spaces as well. And we move forward to the next news, where we are going to read about the recent report which has been published, which actually tells us about a very important data related to the elephants in our country. So the Wildlife Institute of India has released its report, and that is the status of elephants in our country. According to which, the estimation for elephant population in our country is 22,446 elephants across the 4 landscape, which has actually elicited comparison with the 2017 figure, and that was of 29,964. So the first elephant population estimation was conducted in the year of 1929 when the Viceroy of our country was Lord Irwin. In modern day, at that point of time it was called as United Province. Right now the state has been bifurcated into UP and Uttarakhand. A direct total count method was conducted, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Second is the Project Elephant 1992 when that was launched. So to estimate the population of elephant, various methods were inculcated. Tracking based total count, water hole count, transect count, dung count, etc. Ultimately, a synchronous all India elephant estimation (SAI) was adopted, according to which in the year of 2021 there were 29,964 elephants. But as per the report of 2025 released by the Wildlife Trust of India, the population has come down to 22,446, thus registering a 25% decline in the population. But the government has defended itself. The government is saying that now we have actually used a DNA-based method, and that we have done for the first time to estimate elephant. And thus now it will be treated as a new monitoring baseline for the further research. So keep this snapshot for prelims very dear to you. The elephant which we find in our country, the Asian elephants, for which we also have almost 60% of the world's population for Asian elephant, this is called as Elephas maximus indicus, and this is smaller in size in comparison to the African elephant. These are majorly found in all kind of forest which we have in our country: grasslands, dry deciduous, semi-deciduous, semi-evergreen, evergreen forest. In the IUCN list, International Union for Conservation Nature of list, the elephant is listed, Asian elephant is listed under the endangered list, and it is protected under the highest degree of protection under the Schedule 1 of WPA 1972. Keep this in mind that the gestation period, when let's say for example the elephant gets pregnant and keeps the baby in her tomb, so that is basically the gestation period is 22 months, which is the longest for any animal in the world. Their lifespan is around 40 to 65 years. Also, 53% of the total elephants which we have in our country are actually found specifically in the regions of Western Ghats. And as per this recent report, the highest number of elephant population is in the state of Karnataka, followed by Assam, Tamil Nadu, and then ultimately Kerala. Keep this in mind that these elephants actually play a very pivotal role in the seed dispersal, in the ecosystem regulation, where they are also called as ecosystem engineers, as well as sustainable livelihoods. So the idea is that when these elephants are of so much of importance, there are several issues which has been highlighted by the report itself. So yes, when the World Population Report 2024 released by UNFPA is telling us that we have become the biggest or the most populous country in the world, it's very obvious that the economic and resource need for the humans has also been increasing. And that is leading to habitat fragmentation and loss of traditional elephant corridors. Why? Because their movement is being disrupted. Keep this in mind that the elephant, you might have heard that epithet which is called as elephant memory. Because their memory is so sharp that any such route which they have taken, they remember it for years. But when they come back to the same route after the years, what they find there? Railway lines, highways, power infrastructure, or fencing of agricultural land, thus increasing the cases of human and wildlife conflict. Also, the mining operations which takes place in central India. In northeast India, there is also kind of difficulty which the officials faces because of the data estimation. Why? Because of the difficult terrains which lies there. So what are the steps which has been taken by the government of India to actually preserve these elephants? First and foremost is the Project Elephant, which was launched in the year of 1992, which provides technical and financial support to the states. Second, we have currently 33 elephant reserves and more than 100 elephant corridors in our country. Some important elephant reserves has been listed here for you. Like for example, Neelkurinji Elephant Reserve in the state of Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Karnataka, Periyar in Kerala, Mayurbhanj in Odisha, Kaziranga in Assam, and Rajaji Corbett Elephant Reserve in Uttarakhand. Also, for social engineering purposes, the government launched Gaj Yatra campaign to create public awareness to celebrate elephant as India's national heritage animal. Then there was monitoring illegal killing program of elephants launched by site, and it has also been listed in the appendix 1 of conservation of migratory species as well as sites. What is sites? Again, a very important corner for your prelims. The site is an international agreement to actually ensure international trade in animal and plant, which was drafted by IUCN and entered into force in 1975. India became signatory of CITES in the year of 1976. The Secretariat for CITES is administered by United Nations Environment Programme and it is located at Geneva, Switzerland. Keep a very important statement in your mind. CITES is a legally binding treaty, but it is not self-executing. So unless and until the country does not ratify it to each and every provision and does not agree to the specific provision of CITES, CITES cannot act as a national law for that state. After this, solve this prelims PYQ and we move forward to the next news, where we'll cover another important species keeping in mind the prelims. And that species which has featured today is blackbuck. So in 2018, officials at Chhattisgarh Barnawapara Wildlife Sanctuary actually embarked on an ambitious venture to do what? To revive the blackbuck population 50 years after it had actually become locally extinct. And that was a gamble because the blackbuck was facing habitat loss, human encroachment, just like elephant, forest fragmentation, which actually contributed to the animal's erasure from the state. However, the officials actually kept on putting the effort, and now the Barnawapara Wildlife Sanctuary actually boasts 190 blackbucks, an official plan to replicate the conservation model across the state. So for this purpose, they had launched a 2021-26 revival plan, where they kind of translocated 50 blackbuck from National Zoological Park of Delhi and 27 from Pendari Zoological Garden of Bilaspur to this particular Barnawapara Wildlife Sanctuary. The dramatic decline which was faced because of habitat loss and anthropogenic activity. But now in Chhattisgarh, at that point of time, the species was completely disappeared by 1970 and remained locally extinct for 50 years, but now it has revived, and just look at the numbers which they have achieved. So again, a very important snapshot on blackbuck for prelims, which is also has a lot of religious significance as well, considered as the vehicle of Vayudev. The blackbuck or Antilope cervicapara ancestors actually came from Saharo-Arabian region. Under the IUCN status, it is listed as least concern, and under the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, it is listed as endangered species, and thus it gets the highest protection under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. It is formed or distributed uniformly across our country in Rajasthan, Punjab, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka, various southern states like Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh. Keep this in mind that it is a very important species for open grassland and thus act as a kind of a marker for this kind of grasslands, semi-arid plants and scrublands. It maintains the grassland ecology and act as a prey for wolves and jackal, etc. The highest population of blackbuck currently in our country is found in Rajasthan, and the largest blackbuck population in one particular reserve is in the Velwadar National Park in the region of Gujarat. These were basically the conservation measures which were adopted by the Raipur Forest Official Division to actually restore the grassland, actually implement anti-poaching measures. Then also they paved way for community engagement to encourage the farmers to implement wildlife-friendly farming such as organic farming, rotational grazing practices, run community awareness program on blackbuck conservation, to actually monitor and do research on ecology, behavior and interaction with various agricultural practices, and also to actually fund these projects, to provide kind of economic models to provide ecotourism, identification of the sites where wildlife tourism actually can be promoted. And that led to the various benefits, like for example, nature guides, drivers, homestays actually implemented profit sharing for direct community benefits. And for this, such 4 division efficient management system was created, which you guys can also implement in your any kind of fauna specific conservation programs answer. And we move forward to the next news, where we'll discuss about a very important festival which has appeared in the news today. What is the news? The news tells us that how, as the winter approaches, the women of Telangana, they pay floral tributes to the mother nature in a very unique way. And this festival is called as Bathu Kamma. Bathu Kamma is a celebration of the intrinsic bond between earth, water and humankind. So whenever you guys are writing about the environment conservation in your mains answer, you can also mention about such traditional festivals, which actually highlights the importance of nature for the local communities. The particular festival which is observed during the Satvahana calendar, the Satvahana dynasty, the 9-day festival actually begins on the Bhadrapada Purnima, also known as Mahalaya Amavasya, and concludes on Durga Ashtami, typically falling in September or October. Bathu Kamma festival celebrated in Telangana, in which particular time period? Later half of the monsoon before the onset of winter, where abundant flowers like Gunuka, Tangedu are of great kind of provide great visuals to the visitors and thus act as a kind of a tourist attraction as well. The great attraction is also your Shil Pakka Pandlu, a kind of a custard apple also called as a poor man's apple. Then the flowers are actually arranged in brass plate, which is called as tambalam, which is carried by women. And then ultimately they carry this in the brass plate a deity. The deity is Bodemma, a deity of Gauri's mother, Durga, which is made with earthly mud, and then ultimately it is immersed in the pond, and they believe that that will ultimately lead to the kind of the clearing of the pond from any kind of algae, harmful algae or biomagnification which has taken place in the pond, and thus kind of provide them a rejuvenation. Thus, are there any other important festivals celebrated across our country where we celebrate nature? The answer is yes. Like for example, Pongal in Tamil Nadu, Magh Bihu in Assam, which is a harvest festival worshipping nature for crops. Nokhai in Odisha, thanking the Mother Earth. So you guys can also recall the Mother Earth which we find in the Indus Valley civilization, a terracotta statue of her. So since then we are actually worshipping Mother Earth, and thus we act or impose on ourselves a very important responsibility to protect the nature. Then Sarhul in Jharkhand, Wangla in Meghalaya, where we actually thank the sun god Misi Saljong for blessing the crops. Mimikut of Mizoram, where we worship the spirit of nature. A very important flower-based festival which is called as Sair-e-Gul Faroshan or Phool Walon Ki Sair, a 3-day festival of flowers in Delhi which was actually started by Mughal Emperor Akbar II because he wanted to establish communal harmony in Delhi at that point of time. Keep this in mind that it was Akbar II under which the Mughal ruler actually became the pensioner of East India Company, and it was Akbar II who actually gave the title of Raja to Raja Ram Mohan Roy as well. Then Lusong is celebrated in Sikkim, Kharchi Puja in Tripura to honor the earth, and Losar festival in Arunachal Pradesh to worship agriculture and animal husbandry by the Monpa tribe. Keep this festival very dear to you for the prelims, and we move forward to the last news of the day, where a very important article actually appeared in the Hindu on page number 9, where it specifically talked about the blooming of a flower and provided you very important facts actually which can become a statement in the prelims. The article says that Gadalur is shrouded in mist and Kurinji. These Kurinjis are bell-shaped flowers which have burst over the hills after 8 years. What is special that it has bloomed at Tamil Nadu's newly notified reserve forest in the Neelgiri region? Keep this in mind that the Kurinji is not just a rare flower, but it also acts as a very important indicator of climate change. And these Kurinjis are actually excellent barometer for grassland. So if you look at our India's State of Forest Report 2023, the total forest and tree cover in our country at that point of time was 25.17% of geographical area, which was obviously way lesser than the target which we have set for ourselves under National Forest Policy 1988, according to which 33% of the total geographical area will be under forest and tree cover, but we have been able to achieve only 25.17%. The states and UTs which have highest percentage of their geographical area under the forest and tree cover is your Lakshadweep, Mizoram and Andaman and Nicobar. However, the highest area, the states with highest area under the forest cover is your MP, Arunachal Pradesh and Chhattisgarh or MAC. Now, decoding the article. Keep this in mind that when we talk about such Kurinjis, there are different types of such Kurinjis which is found in our country and the world. Here the Kurinji which is blooming in the region of Tamil Nadu, Nilgiris, is your Strabylanthes kunthiana. This is particularly a kind of a Neelkurinji which blooms once every 12 years in high altitude grassland, and this is endemic to the Western Ghat. Now this particular Kurinji which is blooming in the region of Tamil Nadu, that is Strobylanthes sessilis. This blooms every 8 to 12 years but lower than 1300 meter altitude. So Neelkurinji, which is called as Strobylanthes kunthiana, it actually blooms once only every 12 years but in the high altitude grassland, that is more than 1300 meter altitude. Then there is something called as Kareen Kurinji. This blooms every year. These Kurinjis, they play a very pivotal role in the larger ecosystem as they sustain butterflies, honeybees and insects. Keep this in mind that there are 450 species of Kurinjis found across the world. 150 of them are found only in our country or endemic to India. Like for example Neelkurinji or Kareen Kurinji, etc. Also, this Kurinji plants which we are discussing about, they only blooms or flower only once in their lifetime. A very important statement which you guys should remember. And with this, we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Before we depart, a very happy Diwali to all of you from the team of Vajiram and Ravi. Make sure that the lights of your dreams do not fade away for years to come. Take a good break from your studies. Celebrate the festival with your friends and family. And keep the dieting principles aside and devour in the sweets. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.